Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here with us. I am Cynthia Schreiner, Community Manager from Liongard, and I am joined here today with Everett Odom, our Product Manager from Liongard, and Jim Lippy, the CEO of SaaS Alerts. And today we're going to talk about MSP Security Redefined and how Liongard and SaaS Alerts really work hand in hand to help you redefine your security stack. So I'm going to start here with Everett. Everett, can you just tell everyone hi and a little bit about you and your background?
Hey everybody, welcome. So my name is Everett Odom, Product Manager at Liongard for Inspectors. Started my career off in the military and DoD space as a signals intelligence and cybersecurity analyst. From there, I transitioned to the MSP space about 6 years ago. Spent some time in the MSP space as a senior security engineer and service manager. From there, I transitioned to the vendor side, working for Liongard about a year ago, and so here I am today, and I'll go ahead and pass it over to Jim.
Great, thank you, Everett. It's great to be with both of you here today, and all of you joining us. Thank you so much for it. So Jim Lippy, CEO of SaaS Alerts. I started in technology as CEO of a MSP, Thrive Networks in Boston, Massachusetts. I was president and CEO of Thrive from 2005 to 2012. And ended up selling to Staples back when I was there. After that, I became president of a cloud computing company called Independence IT. We sold that to CloudJumper. And then most recently, I was, before SaaS Alerts, I was at Kaseya. I was senior vice president and general manager at Kaseya, working with our 20,000 MSPs globally. I joined SaaS Alerts in January, and it's been super exciting. And I get to work with great partners like Liongard, and really excited about what we're able to share today.
Awesome. So glad to have you here, both of you here today. Okay, hopefully that's the last time I stumble over my words. Okay, all of my party people that are here watching and listening, please keep the chat going. Like, I'd love for this to feel interactive. You can ask a question down there at the bottom where it says ask a question. You can pop it in there. So let's just, don't wait till the end. I really like to throw people off their game in the middle of a webinar. Nothing makes me more delighted. So yeah, put those questions in there and let's see what we can do. So let's go over our agenda for today. So we're going to talk about the evolving security landscape, overview of both platforms, both Liongard and SaaS Alerts, and then just talking about how those really work together. We've got three key security pillars where we really fit together hand in hand, per se. So let's talk about that evolving security landscape. And I'm going to make this just a little bit bigger for everyone in case your eyes are like mine. Here we go. All right. So Everett, Mr. DoD, tell us about this changing security landscape and what you're seeing.
All right. So first and foremost, you got to think yourself, what is this security landscape, right? And this security landscape, defined in the MSP and IT service provider space, is that ever-growing volume of responsibilities that IT service providers and MSPs have to deal with on a daily basis. And what we mean by growing is in the last 6 months, Liongard's noticed a trend around users and systems. Those kind of make the key components of managed services. And that average has grown and grown and grown. And what we've noticed is that on average to date, most IT service providers and MSPs have to manage somewhere around 18 different systems or solutions per user. And on average, there's 70 users per environment. That's a lot of systems and a lot of users to make sure you're working and coordinating security-wise correctly. A bigger piece of that is over the last 6 months, we've noticed that trend transform, right? And it's going to continue to do so as time goes on to that SaaS and cloud-based solutions. We've seen it go up towards 60% of those 18 managed systems and solutions become cloud-based or SaaS offerings, right? So essentially what that means is it's demonstrating the growth, not just in a traditional network security environment, but more to an elaborate, out of your hands type of situation where you're managing solutions that are cloud-based, on-premise, and then the users that are just using these tools and information all over the place, right? So that's what we mean by that evolving, security landscape.
Great. And Everett, we're going to talk more about that essentially transformation later on in the presentation. But one of the things, the 60% number, that is right on with what we're seeing from other industry studies. So Better Cloud came out with some data about 6 months ago that stated by 2025, so just 4 years from now, 85% of all software will be consumed as software as a service, so SaaS applications. So
Wow.
this trend is not going anywhere. We need to educate our community about the power of software as a service and essentially how to add more value to our client relationships around SaaS. And specifically, I'm going to share some data here from our data set. I'm going to talk more about this, where we get this data from in a second. But almost 20% of Google Workspace users essentially OAuth into other applications. About 11% use 365 credentials for third-party SaaS applications. So when you look at our data at SaaS Alerts on a blended basis, we've got 4,500 users using OAuth to get into other third-party SaaS applications. Almost every third-party SaaS application on the planet wants to use your Google or 365 credentials to log into their software. Why? Because people know that they use those software applications all the time, so it makes it easier to use their product. Why is that important? It's important because it widens the threat vector for the user, right? If you now have multiple applications you can potentially penetrate to gain access to 365 or Google Workspace, that becomes a problem across the board. And that's something that we're seeing it become more and more pervasive as SaaS becomes more popular.
So you're saying that when it asks me if I want to use my Facebook credentials to log into whatever new app I have, I shouldn't do that?
Probably not, Cynthia. Yeah,
Okay.
that's not a good idea.
Awesome. Not saying I did it, but just
No, of
throwing
course
that
not.
out there.
Of course not.
All right, let's move on and not talk about what a security risk I am. Okay, so how do we stay vigilant with users like me?
Yeah, so Cynthia, we talked about some data before, and we are dropping a first ever industry report from SaaS Alerts called the SASE report. This is new. This is brand new for anybody on this webinar right now. This is a sneak peek into what we're doing. So Tuesday, we are releasing the SASE report, and it stands for Security Application Security Insights. And we looked at data from our platform, from the SaaS Alerts platform, from January 1st to May 31st. And we looked at we've got now, in that data set, we have over 100 MSPs that service over 750 small businesses and 30,000 users. And
That's
from
amazing.
that,
A lot of data.
it is a lot of data, and there's 15 million events that we're monitoring from that data set. So we're going to share some more of that data, as we go through this. But we're teasing it as we go. And releasing the full report on Tuesday.
Very, very cool. Okay,
Yeah.
so yeah. Oh, Everett, sorry, go ahead. Talk about staying vigilant.
Yeah, so I just want to touch on a piece that Jim mentioned is so there's 15 million events that they have in their reports. That's something that we're seeing trending across the IT service provider and MSP space. But on the Liongard side, doing some research here, you can see we broke down some numbers on some of the capabilities in the platform around change detections and alerting. What we're seeing here is on a per environment basis, there's just a large volume, right, of things that people have to monitor or want to monitor, right? And what that means, with the whole staying vigilant is that you can't just set and forget security. It's something that you constantly have to monitor. But with those 15 million events, you're also talking about a lot of white noise. We see, as you can see, for change detections in the last 6 months, over 13 million change detections, identified in our platform alone. So breaking it down to the environment with, on an average 275, that's still a whole lot for a single service provider to manage on a per environment if you look at the average number of environments for an MSP. So it's something that you have to keep in mind as an IT service provider and MSP, that you can't just set up a security piece and walk away and say, I'm protected. It's obvious that you need to get out there, you need to keep constantly monitoring it and keep updating it and staying on top of the different events and trends and things of those, on average, 18 services and solutions that you're out there providing.
Yeah. And Everett, I want people to remember this slide later when we talk about how we complement each other as a solution. One of the objectives of today's webinar is to make sure people understand that Liongard and SaaS Alerts do not compete. Since starting at SaaS Alerts in January, I can't tell you how many times people have asked me, well, don't you compete with Liongard? And the answer is absolutely not. We complement Liongard and they complement us. So let's remember this slide when we get to the Venn diagram you put together, Everett.
Yeah.
All right. So as we talk about staying vigilant, we also need to talk about where to focus, right? Where maybe you're going to see the categories driving the most changes. So where are you seeing that, Jim?
Yeah. So this is data, again, from the SASE report. Okay. And this is a really important takeaway here. So if you think about 100 security events, okay. So first of all, when you look at the volume of data that we have, 93% of users are on 365 in our data set. Okay, so that's a massive number. So when you look, so the numbers on an absolute basis can get skewed. We can easily say, well, 365 is throwing off by far the most alerts. And it is, right, on an absolute basis because so many people are on it. But we want to do it on a per user basis to also so we can understand what the risk is per user and looking at across all the events. So if you think about 100 security events, right, on a per user basis, roughly one event per 100 on 365 elevates to a critical alert. Whereas the same 100 events, right, or 100 events for Salesforce, for instance, right, is going to be essentially 0.75 will rise to 0.75 will rise to a critical alert. On Google Workspace, essentially half a percent will rise to a critical alert if you're looking at 100 events. And lastly, you look at Dropbox, and in fairness, to the other applications there, Dropbox is the easiest of the bunch. There's not 365, Google Workspace. There's a lot of functionality in there. When we think 365 and Google Workspace, we're talking about all the components, right? So for 365, we're talking about Teams, we're talking about OneDrive, we're talking about email, we're talking about SharePoint, right? So that's all there. Dropbox is certainly easier, but if you look at 100 events for Dropbox, essentially a third of a percent will rise to the status of a critical alert, which is something obviously that should be acted on.
Yeah, and teeing off of that, so that per user thing is users, right? That's like the key root word, and the whole statement is per user. When we talk about the MSP community, again, spent about 6 years there, users were typically your number one weakness in any type of situation or scenario when I'm talking about security. Not because everybody is horrible, it's just that's the nature of the beast. There's so many different facets. There's, again, that number of 18 systems or solutions they're dealing with. We talk about that. Where are those categories where we see the emerging threats? And it falls down into a few categories we identified here. And I think it's great that some of the systems that Jim just highlighted fall into these categories. You have your email services, directory services, right? Because Microsoft's not just email. It's, just get your Azure and Azure AD and things of that nature. Remote access, again, user permissions being a big part of that. We separated that from directory services because permissions are a big changing category across all these different SaaS solutions. And then again, physical equipment. You talk about we'll probably never get 100% away from physical equipment anytime soon as we see that trend of SaaS and cloud-based solutions grow. But the user aspect will always be there. And that's, I think, a key point in this is, staying vigilant and focusing on these categories. You also need to focus on the security effort in these areas, in these tools, in these categories. And the user aspect is one of those big key areas you need to maintain focus of.
Exactly, Everett. And, back in my days at Kaseya, I would travel around the world talking to MSPs and doing security talks. And one question I'd always ask at the outset of a presentation is, what is the biggest security risk in the environments that you support? And immediately, hands would go up, and a smart MSP in the front row would say the user, right? And it's not because users are malicious. It's not because they're dumb. It's because they want to try to get the most done in the shortest period of time possible. So they're trying to take shortcuts all the time. And let's face it, security best practices and shortcuts aren't necessarily congruent, right? So it's our job to make sure that we're checking up on those users and enforcing policies that are truly best practices around security.
Agreed 100% there.
Yeah, we're definitely not malicious. Okay, so something that, we were going through this day and talking a little bit, Everett, you mentioned data hygiene. Can you explain a little bit about that and the hybrid workplace and all of that? I keep hearing all these like buzzy words about data.
So data hygiene really comes down as keeping track of the data, where it's at and where it's being used and where it's being shared to, things of that nature. And pointing out some of the number of users per collaboration tool here. These are a list of some of the common collaboration tools we see in the industry. And you can see here on average, like the numbers are pretty representative across the board, that there's just a growing number of people using these tools to collaborate. And keeping that hygiene clean is keeping track of not only who in your organization or your client's organization that you manage has access to the information, but the tools they're using to manage, manipulate, and potentially share externally to other users, right? So that hygiene comes down to is being aware of the tool, being aware of the data, being aware of the user, and how all three interact that and essentially have the potential to become a security risk to you and your clients.
Exactly. And one of the things that's interesting about this slide, your icons right there, it's like you look at Teams and you look at Slack and you look at OneDrive and G Drive. It's amazing looking at our data, how many people actually use a combination of all of those. So if you're on 365, right, Teams takes care of most of the functionality that Slack provides. And certainly, if you're on 365, you don't need G Drive. But at least in the enterprise space, 36% of 365 users also use G Suite. Now in our data set, it's 2%, but it's still surprising based on the fact you have all that functionality. Now we're finding more and more folks that are using Zoom in addition to 365, right? There's a lot of people that use Zoom and 365 or Google Workspace, which also is Google Meet. So we're talking again about these applications that are essentially coming into contact with each other. And one of the things that's important to understand is how we can cross-correlate these applications. That's one of the things that we do at SaaS Alerts. We don't look at applications in a vacuum. We actually cross-correlate the data back and forth to provide additional insights to the MSP around user behavior. And we'll get more into that in a second, but that's really important to understand.
And that's a very good talking point, Jim. And just looking at these numbers we have here next to this correlation or collaboration tools is in most instances, we say we have on average 70 users per environment. So if you throw that in your Microsoft 365, we have a couple tools here outlined that are part of that Microsoft universe, right? But you notice that number of average users per tool are not the same. It's because in certain environments, they lean more towards that Teams piece, or they lean more towards that file sharing, or in the same organization, they could be using both, but in different segmented sections of work throughout the organization. So, the security isn't thing like, oh, well, it's I got to make sure my SharePoint's set up correctly. It's like, you need to make sure your SharePoint's set up correctly for file sharing for this group that does the external piece, this piece, they have a different policy for internal only, and then that other group that does both, right? So I think that aligns very well with what you just mentioned there.
Well, yeah. So someone, Carrie over here mentioned, something about needing more storage, which I know Google is great about giving people tons of storage, right? But I'm thinking about this. Some of this maybe just, users don't know. I've got Outlook, but I don't know how to use OneDrive. Don't know that I have access to it, or I've seen it here or there. But I just but I do know how to use Google Drive because I've shared documents there before. So then I just go over and do that because I don't know. So sounds like a lot of it even just comes down to education within a group, just to make sure that, to your point, the security stuff is set up, and then also they know how to use the tools that are there for them.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
He said I was being sarcastic, but I think this is what my customers think.
He's right. He's right. But look, end of the day, users, they gravitate to what they're comfortable with, right? And what they consider to be a best practice solution for them. There's a lot of people that, rather use Zoom than Teams. So, one of the things that we're doing in the next 2 months is we're going to start monitoring Zoom and Slack too. They can, again, do all of that stuff in Teams, but they'd rather use these other products. And again, like we talked about before, and like the numbers on this slide, as more and more people use additional SaaS applications, it just widens the threat vector exponentially.
100%.
I think touching on something you said earlier and just brought up, like ease of use as well, right? So Cynthia, right? Like I'm not so strong on maybe SharePoint or OneDrive, but I know I can easily drop this thing into my Google Drive and share a link. So it comes down to that ease of use also potentially throws a wrench in that whole security best practices plan, because some of these things, may or may not require central administration again, right?
Less roadblocks. And you're trying to get your job done. Yep, 100%.
I get done fast to move on to the next thing, and whoop, there you go, potential attack vector.
Okay, well, I'm so glad that y'all said file sharing, because we're coming right into that. So talk to us about that when you dug in deeper on this report and file sharing, Jim.
Yeah, some more data from the SaaS report. So we found in our data set, again, 750 companies, right? 30,000 users. And this is, again, we only sell through MSPs. So these are all MSP customers. 175 files shared per hour. Most of the files are from OneDrive, right? Because obviously 93% of the users in our data set are coming from 365. That being said, the people that are using Google Workspace actually share on a percentage basis a lot more files, right? And Cynthia, I think that comes back to your point. It's just a lot easier to use their file share, right? Here's a big takeaway for me. 84% of files shared internally, but 16% are shared externally. So those are like anonymous links going out to folks. Let's give you a use case. So, Everett and I are working on a PowerPoint presentation, right, for this. And, this is going to be over in shortly, right? So in a matter of minutes. And then we're done. So what happens to the link that we've been sharing back and forth, right? So Everett's awesome because he's a security professional, so he's going to make sure nothing bad happens. But 99.99% of users out there are not smart like Everett. So they don't understand that they need to terminate these links. So what happens? They become orphaned links.
I'm adding something to my to-do list. Thank you, Jim.
So orphan links are bad, very bad. So one of the things that we do at SaaS Alerts is we actually will, if a file that has been shared, that link is dormant for 30 days, we're going to alert the MSP, hey, look, you have a customer that's got a file share that's been dormant. You should help them terminate that so nothing bad happens, so a bad actor can't tunnel back through and gain access. So that's, ultimately, what we're looking to do here to help MSPs protect their customers.
Carrie is going to win my my most active user award if some other people don't step up to the plate here. Okay. Everett, What else do you want to add there to that as far as, because, you know, I know change management is something that's near and dear to Liongard's heart too.
It is very much so. And like it ties in perfectly. So that scenario of, you know, what happens to those links you don't, you know, in them, block them, disable them, and so on and so forth, is that you get those orphan links. Well, the same thing happens with file sharing in general. And what Liongard has seen a lot of our partners extremely interested in is when in a scenario like that, the change of user permission, right? And or the addition of accounts, both internally and externally to some of these SaaS solutions, right? And then, you know, you create these, you know, security best practice. Let's create a group so only these people can see access to it, and so on and so forth. Then someone's in a group like myself is like, oh, but I want to be able to edit these slides too because, you know, I want to throw in some nice catchphrase or something. So you escalate my privileges, and then we're in this, you know, this webinar, we end it, and yet I'm still in the security group. I still have those escalated privileges, right? And that's something along with not just the data itself, but the user, the groups, the systems. We get, you know, those are a lot of things we see trending in the MSP space that a lot of our partners from our data set shows that they're extremely interested in saying, okay, now that we did this thing, you know, it's not just the thing we have to follow, but also the users, how they're doing and stuff. And I think that aligns really well to that type of scenario and these numbers. I think it pairs very well.
Exactly.
All right. All right, Jim, any final thoughts on this portion, or can we move on to our deep dives?
Just for the record, for Carrie, I want to make sure that this is out there. I didn't call it users and users stupid. I just said you take shortcuts and they're not going to remember to terminate links. So thanks to Carrie for keeping us on our toes.
I love it. It's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So I know one of the reasons that y'all are here today is to also learn about both of these solutions. So we are going to do just that. And we're going to start here with Liongard, Security Without Compromise. So take it away, Everett. I'm going to zoom this one in.
Yeah. So again, just want to give a quick overview of what Liongard does and how we do it, and really hit that point home again that Jim made earlier. Is like we're very much a complementary tool set. And from the Liongard side, how we accomplish, you know, the pieces for MSPs and those IT service providers are out there. There's a lot of different categories of solutions. You know, you have your endpoints, you have your SaaS solutions, you know, everything in between. They're all kind of out there. They're all kind of floating. And they're, you know, central manageability is kind of the name of the game in most places. Also just tracking them and keeping on top of them, whether it's centrally or not. What Liongard does is take and organize all that information in a usable, meaningful fashion, right? Providing that historical data over periods of time, which we'll get to here in a minute, and gives a nice, clean, crisp outcome around automation. Focus being the automation piece of what IT service providers and MSPs are really looking for when it comes to the data and the management of this data, right? And most of those come in the form of like alerting, documentation, and reporting. And we'll go a little bit deeper in here onto the next few slides on what that really means, right? Around what Liongard does in the form of automation.
All right.
Next.
You can't secure what you can't see. I say it at the booth all the time.
It's, you know, I hear variations of that thrown about at different events, but essentially, you know, you ask a mechanic to fix an engine who doesn't know what an engine is and how it works. He can't fix the engine. Well, the same thing is you can't really secure what you don't know is out there, right? You don't know what you don't know. And what Liongard does is we try to deliver that unified visibility by, you know, giving you that visibility, showing you those things you don't know, surfacing them in a manner that's nice, clean, and crisp to allow you to automatically collect this data, monitor those systems, and then, you know, set up things like alerts and change detection so that you could, you know, really manipulate, get the data that you want, where you want, how you want it, right? And I'll break down how we do that in the next few slides. So how does Liongard take this data, right, this IT data lake, and turn it into like useful, insightful information for our partners and stuff? Well, the first and foremost is the ingestion of this data. We use integrations and inspectors to go out, collect these data, you know, via RESTful API, SS inspections, or anything like that. And then we use tools like metrics, change detections and alerts and reporting to actually make use of all that rich data that's coming in, right? Otherwise, you just have all this data and it's just all that big mess in one location. So what we do is we created metrics and these reporting tools to allow us to filter that data and surface it, make it usable and user friendly. So we'll dive real quick here. I think metrics is next. Or inspector, sorry. So the inspector, right, and integrations, how's Liongard doing this? So you got to understand that there is a problem that the Liongard solution is for. And that problem is the fact that there's so many siloed sources of data, right? They don't aggregate well. And, we as the vendor community, I haven't been the greatest at doing that, right? And it all ends up in this large manual process that, you, the IT service providers, MSPs, have to manipulate to get where you need to and want to be. Well, Liongard's gone through and automated that, right? Providing that unified visibility via bringing in information into a single source that allows you to see things around endpoints and workstation, networks, apps, cloud services, like those SaaS solutions, bringing them into one location. That's the start of this building this IT data cloud, right? So next slide. So we take that.
Here's your metrics.
Yeah. So we take that IT data cloud, right? And now it's all this data. Well, we use things like metrics to take and make that data powerful. We do that from a metric. You can surface key data points, right? So the things you need to see when you need to see them, enabling things like compliance reporting, security best practices, set that standard, come back and check to see when that standard has changed, right? We give you the ability to take these metrics, right? These key data points and put them in a usable, readable, shareable reporting template, right? On top of that, this data lake wouldn't be a lake if we didn't maintain that lake, right? So Liongard provides that historical capability there, 18 months worth of data that we keep in the platform for you. And then lastly, those metrics are also exportable, right? You could send those to some reporting integrations we have, BrightGauge and Power BI, the two most popular ones that I think most of our partner base are familiar with. But it allows you to take Liongard's rich data and surface them where you work. If you spend most of your time with BrightGauge dashboards or in Power BI, right, you could surface that single source of data into the tool where you're working at on a daily basis, right? And then so like alerts, right? We talk about all this data, this IT data lake, but it doesn't really mean anything if there's no functionality behind it. So the real functionality is being able to set a standard. Take your Microsoft 365 or your Azure AD or Active Directory, you onboard a new client, you get them up to your security standards, then you go in and say, okay, these are the 10, 20, 50, whatever the number is of data points you want to maintain to meet your security best practice and the services that you said you provide to your partner. Well, you can set up change detection and actionable alerts inside the Liongard platform so that when one of those data points changes, you can be alerted, right? And we surface those alerts, of course, in platform, instantly give you the visibility like, oh, this changed, this stepped away from that standard that I put in place to protect not only your partner, but of course yourself because you're providing that service, right? Now, another way we do that with those alerts and change detection is we surface those in the platform, which is our single environment dashboard, right? So you can see also all the information around the different inspectors, different key data points, right? We also surface the systems, open alerts, things there. But we allow you to also manipulate that and put that into either a quick view. So if you want to see a little bit more condensed version of that information, right, you can do that. But of course, reports, right? Reports are key. You got to be able to take that data, hand it to someone else within the business model, or even take it and share that with your client. And again, going back to our integrations, a really good way that we see a lot of our partners using this information and identifying these alerts is with our integrations with Power BI and BrightGauge. That's getting that external visibility, and again, putting that information where our partners work most, right? Not just in our platform.
And actually, Gary, one of our partners, just popped in and said Liongard helps seeing issues that we would not know are issues until the customer complains, which I absolutely love, because being able to be proactive in that way, from a customer-facing standpoint, it just means everything. You're not having to have the difficult conversations because you're getting ahead of it. So I think that's fantastic. Yeah. All right. Great job, Everett. Thank you so much. A round of applause for Everett. And now we're going to move on to Mr. Jim Lippy with SaaS Alerts, SaaS Security, winning on the transition. So talk to us about what y'all are doing and where you're fitting in all of this.
Yeah, and there's so much of what Everett said that I'm looking forward to the next coming slides where we're talking about how we work together. But SaaS Alerts is the first ever SaaS application monitoring solution purpose built for MSPs. Now there's tools that have been identified in the enterprise, have been doing this type of thing for a while. They're called CASB. That's a category called CASB. It stands for Cloud Access Security Broker. So the enterprise has recognized this SaaS trend for a long time, and a lot of CASB products have SaaS connectors in there. So one of the things that we want to do is make sure that we are empowering MSPs to add value to their client relationships. If we recognize, right, based on the previous slides we looked at, that there's a trend that more and more customers are moving to SaaS applications, we need to make sure that we're allowing MSPs to protect those applications and then therefore monetize these applications. I remember back when, this is like a year ago, when I was at Kaseya, I was having a conversation with an MSP in Minnesota. It was kind of a light bulb moment for me. He was telling me he's got 4,000 end users that he supports, and he's got 900 servers that he manages. And he said, and it was kind of a throwaway line. He said, this time last year I had 1,200 servers, and today I have 900. I was like, whoa, back up a second. You lost 300 servers under management in a year? And he said, yeah. I said, why? And he said, well, a lot of my customers are just moving to SaaS applications. I said, well, what are you doing about it? He goes, I don't know. What can I do about it? Oh. So, yeah, exactly. Right. So,
that breaks my heart.
Yeah. So this is really at the heart of what SaaS Alerts is all about. We want to make sure that we are giving MSPs the opportunity to what we call win on the transition. We understand that small businesses are transitioning their technology. So we want to make sure MSPs have the tools to properly protect those applications and that technology.
All right, let me focus this in here so you can see it.
So, we'll just talk about the problem that we're solving here. I think we have acknowledged through these other slides and the trending that we're seeing from a SaaS perspective, but you look at the traditional support model from an MSP perspective, and it's evolved over time. In this last year, it's evolved a lot more. So you look at the traditional support model back when I had my MSP, 2005 to 2012, it was all about managing small business on-prem application servers, which were normally accessed by company-owned devices on company-managed networks. And I specifically remember, customers asking me in sales meetings, well, how do you manage our applications? I said, we don't manage your applications. We actually support the infrastructure. We manage the infrastructure that those applications live on. And that was our pat answer for everything. But now the model is transitioning, right? It's evolving. Now MSPs are attempting to support their small business customers shift to the cloud and using SaaS applications. And now, because of COVID and the hybrid work environment, a lot of times these applications are being accessed by personal devices on open networks, which obviously creates a massive security gap, for those small businesses that you support. And by the way, going back to the story I mentioned before, it also represents a decreasing revenue stream. If you're banking your business on managing on-prem servers on a go-forward basis, that is not a winning strategy based on all the numbers we've been talking about. So how can you essentially take a solution and then monetize the usage of these SaaS applications going forward? So one of the things I like to do is talk about the problem through actual use cases, right? So let's just say use case number one, you've got one end user that falls victim to a phishing campaign, and now a bad actor has legitimate credentials to a 365 account. If you're not monitoring 365 for unusual user activity, you would never know, right? So one of the things that SaaS Alerts will do is monitor that activity. If there's unusual behavior, like logging in from an unknown location or a non-whitelisted location, you are going to get alert as the MSP to work with your customer to find out what is going on there. Okay, and we've had this happen now countless times. And we've had a few MSPs that are using it for themselves, because one of the great things about SaaS Alerts is you can use it for free. If you're on our platform, MSPs use it for free. And one MSP found out that one of their techs took a unapproved vacation. They were logging in from a city that a tropical city that they were not supposed to be working out of. So use case number 2 is one of the things we were talking about before, which is users connecting to multiple applications using their 365 or their G Suite account or Google Workspace credentials, right? So again, this increases the threat vector exponentially. And then we were talking about the shared files and the orphan links. And that is another, big use case that we see time and time again, remembering that 16% of all files are shared external to an organization. These are just 3 use cases, but we actually monitor for 35 different types of events, including, adding devices to applications or changing in security policy or user policy. So, there's a lot of logic that's been built into the system. So, as we look ahead to the next slide, we think about the solution, right? And if you think about SaaS Alerts as a solution, think about it as a robotic employee, right? That scans the application back and forth every 90 seconds, surfacing only the information that needs to be acted on behalf of the customer. Okay, so if there's something that needs immediate attention to the critical alert, you can essentially bring that to the customer's attention and start working with them to resolve that issue. So this is, again, that the back and forth is something we're going to talk about, the scanning of the tenants. I mean, and I hear people say in sales presentations or demos that we do, well, I have access to the 365 tenant now, or, whatever the SaaS application is. Yes, but would you want the job of scanning through mountains and mountains of Microsoft 365 logs or Salesforce logs and teasing out the critical alerts that you need to act on? That is a mindless job that nobody wants. So we've created automation that does that. And all of these applications, by the way, when you look into their tenants, they all present logs in a different language. Okay, all of it comes out in a different way. So someone logging in from unknown location might look different in 365 than Google Workspace. One of the things that we do at SaaS Alerts is we've standardized across all the applications. So a unauthorized login looks the same to you as the MSP as it does for every one of the other applications. So making it a lot easier that way as well.
All right. Jim, anything else you wanted to add before I go on to the next section?
No, I can't wait to talk about how we can combine powers here. One or twins power
I'm very
activate.
excited. This fist bump, I'm loving it. All right, So combining the power of Liongard and SaaS Alerts. So loving this Venn diagram. Let's dive into this. So we've got what Liongard does, we've got what SaaS Alerts does, and then we've got a little bit tiny overlap, but you can definitely see here that these are 2 different solutions. So Jim, I'll hand it to you since you just got done talking. You can, go over your bullet points, and then we'll let Everett.
Yeah. So it's really important to understand we only do SaaS applications. That is our bread and butter. We understand that, there's a movement towards SaaS applications, and the perimeter is completely changed. So that's what we think is important. Doesn't mean that, we are the end all be all to your security answers, right? We are just a specific solution for SaaS security. Okay. And there's other things like Liongard that are important to your stack. But we do real-time event monitoring of those SaaS applications. We specifically look at user behavior and the cross correlation of these the cross correlation of applications, and also, as we talked before, looking at DLP or data prevention or data loss prevention. When you think about SaaS alerts, you should think about streaming, right? Constant stream of alerts that you need to be thinking about. When you think of Liongard, right? It's state. It's a snapshot every 4 8 hours, whatever it is, and we can help. Our alerts helps you take that information to change what you need to change based on the configurations, the state configurations that you have already identified in Liongard. And that's one of the great ways, that these two applications come together and work well together, because we help supply information that, in real time, that can help, Liongard from a state perspective.
Yeah, that's a really great point there, Jim. So think of it this way, SaaS alerts, obviously what Jim explained there is like real time, right? So security based off of real time event and log monitoring. Liongard complements that with, essentially security via deep visibility, right? So we collect system state configurations and, surface this information around management of systems and user policies. We collect that on a scheduled basis, and we keep that long term, right? You think of other solutions, I think the one that most comes to mind for a lot of our partners is RMMs. And, the big issue there is they only keep the data for so long, right? Whereas Liongard, we keep that for 18 months. So, we put that out there for long term. But that deep visibility of those changes to system state. So the real-time monitoring gives you like, oh, this changed, or there's this login from out of country, or whatever the case may be. The system state piece is, hey, there was a policy change that allowed that real-time event to happen, right? There was a new system add-on that allowed, the facilitation of that event. There was a new user, right, that had privileges escalated. You can see that it happened in that time frame. It really also goes to, meeting different parts of different compliance requirements. A lot of our partners in the IT community, they fall on NIST, they fall on CMMC, they got PCI DSS, like all these different security compliance tools, and you can't just do part of it. Like we only do real time. You also need to provide that historical analysis. You also need to be able to bridge that gap of saying that, yes, this event happened, but what are the other events that may have potentially led up to it in your system state configurations that facilitated and allowed that event to happen, right? So again, it goes back to, I think, the overlap here is really, we do monitor the systems, we do monitor the users together and the changes to those, but we do that in two different measures. One's real time, one's deep visibility, right? I think it's a perfect marriage of solutions, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Great.
And so then let's just, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to kind of answer Carrie's question there. He said,
about Augment.
How do you compare it against Augment? So we get that a lot because obviously, they're into SaaS as well, but they look at, first of all, SaaS is a massive category. So they focus on management and cost optimization and provisioning of applications. We solely focus on the security of SaaS applications, and we go really, really deep into security. So I know Gavin really well from his days at Enable. We've talked quite a bit about our solutions, and we are both really bullish about essentially bringing more awareness to SaaS management and security collectively to the community. So in many ways, we complement each other as well.
Very good. Okay, so now that we've kind of seen this in this pretty little diagram, we've got 3 security pillars. We really just want to show with some stories just quickly how Liongard and SaaS Alerts work hand in hand. Oh, I think I went one too far, excuse me. So we're going to start with identity and access management. So Everett, do you want to start here? We've got our stuff over here at system settings, MFA, and user permissions and password policies.
Yeah, I mean, so IAM, identity and access management is one of the key pillars of security. And again, this better together solution is the system state configuration, these things, the system settings, whether or not users have MFA enabled, whether or not there's an MFA policy inside the solution or system you're using, right? And that you're going down to the user permissions, policy set, like being able to identify when those things change and who changed them and so on and so forth, really helps meet some of the compliance needs around IAM. A lot of our partners are moving into larger industries, to work from home. We have partners in the DoD Gov arena, like making sure you're able to identify that this is that system state configuration. This is our policies. These are our requirements that we put out there. And when there's a deviation from those, speak to that one half of what IAM is really all about, right? And then I'll let Jim cover the other half here.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Everett. So, when you look at IAM, we have a lot of IAM alerts that come out of SaaS alerts, right? So if you think, again, real-time alerting, they flow into whatever PSA system that you have. So you can, in the form of a ticket, and then run reports for the customer, whether you're doing prospecting for that customer, for that prospect, or you're doing a quarterly business review with them. You're showing value, how you have eyes on these applications now. But with respect to like IAM, one of the things that we found now is, MSPs have found it very difficult to get their customers, for example, to adopt MFA. And they can actually take our reports and show the real-time, for instance, brute force attack that's going on in real time and say, this is exactly why you need to be using MFA. There is a brute force attack going on right now against this user's 365 account. And usually we see it's against executives in an organization. So you take this to an executive and say, hey, look, this is what's going on right now. And then you're in a position where that customers can be a lot more likely to adopt MFA, which you've been pushing on them for probably the last 2 or 3 years.
Very good. Okay, so let's move on to policy management. So Jim, how do you see this working here with policy management and what that means to you?
Yeah. So, we again focus on prevention via visibility and better hygiene. We talked about hygiene, throughout this presentation. But we can tell you that we've been general access on our software for 6 months, but we've had other beta customers on for over a year. And, specifically, we have got customers that started out, and when we lit them up, it was like a Christmas tree, alerts everywhere. And over time, what's happened is they've actually gone through their MSPs, taken the right hygiene steps. And so an organization, 100-person organization that, had 20 to 30 critical alerts per week are now down to 2 or 3 consistently, right? And we're seeing this now every time an MSP, we're adding, 25 to 30 MSPs per month at this point. Every time someone, adds their customers, we see brute force attacks happening in real time. We see 3,000 brute force attacks per day.
Jeez.
Yeah, which is an insane number based on the fact that we only have now, about 130 MSPs and 750 customers on it. But taking care of those orphan links that we talked about before, ensuring employees are logging in, from the right places. Our application will allow you to whitelist IP addresses, right? So anything outside of those IP addresses, if you want, can throw an alert. So this type of constant hygiene and monitoring and alerting certainly gives a lot more visibility to the MSP to add the value they want to the customer.
I think what pairs really well with that, again, being complementary services, is that let's talk about this onboarding use case that is common in the IT industry. Like, you bring on a new client, right? You set them up in the SaaS alert, like Jim said, and instantly you see that brute force attack. But there's also could be policies and procedures and conditional access is set up for whatever the SaaS application is to prevent things like that. Certain number of failed events in a certain period of time could have prevented that account from continuing to experience that brute force attack. It could have locked the account. You should have got a ticket created, whatever. So what Liongard brings to the table is that deep visibility into that, right? Surfacing policy-based data. So hop on a Liongard, you get a new client, you onboard them, say you throw in their Azure AD, and you realize there's no conditional access policies. They disabled the security, policies that come with Azure AD out the gate. and they just have some users with MFA, some without, or maybe that CEO that's targeted because they're the public face and name of an organization, and their accounts get blown up. But because it was easier for him to log in without MFA, or him or her being logged in without MFA, there's no policy there. So what Liongard does is, instead of that real-time piece, lets you, scan the environment or the solution and say, these are the things that are wrong, that are allowing the facilitation of all these other bad events and for actors, right? And you're able to identify those attack vectors, whether it's your directory services, whether it's, poor password management or password policy out there. And again, like, there's certain key services that help mitigate, attacks. Back in the day, of course, antivirus was the thing that protected you. Obviously, we know that. It's part of that layered cake that actually protects an environment. But being able to see that, hey, there is or is not antivirus, and it does or does not have a policy applied to it that actually enforces protection for that solution. It's one thing to have it, it's another thing to manage it and make sure it's being managed properly. And that's what Liongard does here to help, complement that real-time alerting capability that SaaS offers.
All right, and then real quickly, this last one, and we need to wrap it up here soon, but change management and compliance. So how we see our two solutions working hand in hand here?
I'll kick off. Yeah, I'll kick off. The thing here is, again, deep visibility. Knowing, getting insight into what you don't know, holding onto that historical data, right? And then being able to act on it is the key piece where Liongard complements the change management and compliance piece. You have a particular compliance, it states you have to do A, B, and C. Within Liongard, you could set up those things to monitor A, B, and C. Set your standard, set up change management and alerting. So whenever that standard changed, you get alert. And then also, again, monitor your user accounts, permissions, and things like that.
Yeah, and then the fact that we're streaming nonstop, again, with these alerts can inform you specifically of how you go back and change some of these thresholds and policies and configurations. And the other thing I just want to point out is, you guys go back 18 months, we go back 12 months. If you look at 365 natively, they hold data for 30 days. So the fact that you have the ability to hold on to this data for forensic purposes, well past what the providers are going to give you, the software providers are going to give you, can be very, very helpful.
Absolutely. All right, so I do have a couple of questions in here. Anthony would like to know, does Liongard or SaaS Alerts have standards such as CMMC to measure against?
So from the Liongard perspective, we do meet and match certain security compliance standards, SOC 2, Type 2 audits and stuff like that. I would highly recommend checking out. We actually have a security and compliance use case page on our website. That'll let you dive into like some of the compliance stuff, and also some stories on how Liongard has helped, address those compliance requirements.
Yeah, and CMMC for us, no, but SOC 2, Type 2, October, and most likely ISO by the end of the year.
Very good. And then Carrie had a question about Liongard and CyberArk. What does that integration look like, or do we have one there?
We don't necessarily have an integration yet. When we speak Liongard and another vendor, there's actually two types of areas. You got your inspector that services that data, populates that IT data cloud, and you actually have an integration where there's either a one or two-way sync of information. It's something that's been brought up on our radar. It actually is not yet in our ideas portal. But
yeah, I was about to say, Carrie.
Yeah, definitely hit up that ideas portal and throw that in there so we could actually track those partners that are interested in that. But it is something we've heard in partner feedback.
Very good. And then there was I did drop or someone dropped a link in for pricing for Liongard. We price not by endpoint, but by customer at a 15 customer minimum. And so we put some information there. Jim, there was also some question about pricing on your side. Did you want to?
Yeah, super easy. 50 cents per user per month. You get a 30-day free trial. If you're an MSP on the platform, you use it free for yourself for internal use. So pretty straightforward.
Awesome. That's super straightforward. We both have straightforward pricing. I love that. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Any other questions? So we do have, if you'd like to request a demo, we've got those links here in the chat, and then they're also right up here. Of course, sales@liongard.com or sales@saasalerts.com for any questions. I think that's about it. Any final closing comments, Jim?
I just want to thank everyone for joining today, and thank you both, Cynthia and Everett, for doing this with us. We really appreciate it, and hope people now know we do not compete; we complement.
We'll see. And now we can just send them this link and be like, Just watch this.
Yes.
Everett, anything for you?
Just to reverberate what Jim said, appreciate everybody joining us today. We are complementary. We work really well together, and we look forward to working well together with all of our partners in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, so much for being here. It was a great time, and we'll see y'all all soon somewhere along the road. Bye.
Thank you.